We are in a new home and it has been so much fun to unpack. If you know me, I really do mean that. I love organizing and putting things in a way that really make a home so sweet to be in, and so this has been really fun. If you missed my video last week, I gave an update that we are moving because our landlords wanted their suite back. We got the notice verbally about 18 days ago, and then 2 days after that we got the formal notice on paper that showed us that we had 4 months to move. By that point I had already gotten boxes, we'd already been looking for a new place to stay, and so we were already on our way out of there, and it just didn't feel right to be there or to be there for Christmas. And so we found a new place relatively fast. The packing happened super quick. And so we have moved and we are now living in this new home. And I just need to say that change can sometimes feel really stressful or frightening, and I sure know exactly what that feels like, and I did feel that way on the first few days after we got the notice. But it can also be such a good thing to go through change, and it's so familiar to me because I just went through this roller coaster of emotions. And it is true that in those moments things feel really tense, but it can push you into something better, and that is truly what has happened. We are in a new home that we already love so much, and it is better than where we were living before. While we were living in the old house, it felt like that was the best. We were close to the river, we had a giant garden space, we lived in a beautiful, serene environment with gorgeous landscape of mountain views and just farm tranquility. It really couldn't get much better, we thought, until we were pushed to move. And now this place is so much better in a lot of ways. For starters, we now live on our own. So before we were living in a barn suite on top of a horse barn, and this new place we have all to ourselves. It has a lot more space. We were in a 800 square foot apartment basically, and now we live in a bigger house with its own property, which is so fun to have our own backyard all to ourselves. The house has 3 bedrooms, so our son gets his own room, and then we have an extra room for guests and personal projects, so that's really exciting. The living room is separate from the kitchen and everything else, which is totally different because in our old house we had a living room and a dining room and my son's room all in one space with the kitchen. So it was a real creative challenge getting that to look good and work functionally in all the capacities that it had to. And I did love the way that the space came together. But it is so nice to have the kitchen in its own room and the living room in its own room and all of us in our own rooms. But my favorite thing of all is watching my son enjoy our backyard by simply opening the back door into this beautiful yard that's fenced in, and I get to keep eyes on him while I'm in the kitchen cooking, baking, preserving, doing whatever, washing dishes, and knowing he is safe and he can go out there as much as he wants to. I can join him or I can be inside working and keep an eye on him. That has been something that has been on my wish list, and it is so surreal having that come true and watching it play out just this week as he discovers this new yard, which is now all his, a new place that is kind of limited in its size and he can fully enjoy and explore safely. And I also got to some cooking. I did spend some time in the kitchen right after we moved. My first meal here was some chicken broth that I made with chicken, which we had while we had company over. It was one of the quickest meals to just sear the chicken, put it in some broth with vegetables in the oven to cook low and slow, like I talk about in my winter cooking video just a couple of videos ago if you're interested in the method that I quickly put together a nice hearty and warm winter meal. And I had a lot of bones and carcasses left over from that, and so I saved it in a Ziploc bag to make some broth this week. So that was one of the first things I did. Take out my Instapot, put in the chicken carcasses, filled it up with water and a little bit of apple cider vinegar, and then get the pressure going for about 2.5 hours to make some delicious broth.
But you shown me life is full of faces. Sometimes clouds got in our favorite places, but we were young and unaware. Oh, I got you, there's no reason to.
The other thing I did right away was make some ice cream, which is not what I thought I would be doing. But in the move, some of the frozen goods came over. We moved all of our freezer goods over, and my frozen fruit from the summer was in a box that was sealed somehow that I wasn't aware of. And so the next morning, we saw some blue leaking on the floor in the kitchen, which I knew was my blueberries. And so we opened the box, and surely there was bananas and blueberries and some other basil olive oil cubes I'd made. But anyway, I needed to get this fruit processed quickly to save it all. And sure, I could have just put it all right in the freezer, no big deal, overnight, but I just didn't want a big block of fruit in my freezer. And so instead I'm turning it all into ice cream. So I just bought a whole lot of extra milk this week and got right to making some ice cream. My friends let us borrow their ice cream maker, and so I have just been making batches and batches, kind of experimenting, having some successes, having some not so great, still edible ice cream. And here are some things that I've learned so far. Small batches work best. A lot of recipes call for about 4 cups of milk or cream and a cup of fruit, some sugar and vanilla. And I found doing 2 cups at a time in this 2-gallon bucket just works better to get that ice cream texture instead of a kind of sorbet texture. Now I did say milk, and it's because if you're using raw milk, which we're using here, it has a whole lot of cream. The cream layer is pretty thick. So if I pour really carefully, I can get a lot of that cream into this and get that desired ice cream texture. Another thing I found out is that maple sugar or coconut sugar works really well. I happened to just run out of sugar, and so this is all I had on hand, and it translates really well into ice cream. An experiment that I thought may not go well, but it did turn out well and has no effect on the ice cream texture, and in fact tastes really good and would be a really healthy alternative to cane sugar. A tip that my friend shared with us was keeping this container in the freezer when we weren't making ice cream. That way it would be ready to go for our next batch. So make sure after you make your batch, and of course before you make your first batch, to keep this container in the freezer to be as cold as possible. The other thing I would mention is not running the machine for longer than the time that your instructions in the manual would say. I find that if you do it even just a few minutes longer than you should, this container just heats up too much, and then you lose that ice creamy texture that we're going for. I'm sure at a later point I'll have some more to say about this, but this is what I've learned so far. Thank you for everybody's love and support on our journey. Stay tuned as I get settled and more organized, lots of things to share with you. And until the next video, cheers!